Ashrei ha'ish asher lo halach batzas rishayim v'derech chatoim lo amad v'moshav leitzim lo yoshav ki im besoras Adonai cheftzo v'soraso yege yomam v'layla v'haya ke'etz shasul al palgei mayim asher piro yitain b'itov alei lo yibol v'chol asher yaseh yatzliach lo chen harishayim kim kamot asher tidfenu ruach al kein lo yokum rishoyim b'mishpat v'chatoim b'adas tzadikim ki yodeh Adonai derech tzadikim v'derech rishoyim toveid. Fortunate is the one who has not followed in the counsel of the wicked, nor stood in the path of the sinners, nor sat in the company of the scornful. Rather his delight is in the Torah of Hashem, meditating in Hashem's Torah, in his Torah day and night. He will be like a tree planted by streams of water, that yields its fruit in season, whose leaf does not wither, and whatever he does will prosper. Not so the wicked, who are like chaff that the wind drives away. The wicked shall not survive judgment, nor sinners in the assembly of the righteous. For the Lord loves the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked is doomed. Mizmor leDavid Adonai, mi agur ba'ahalecha, mishkon b'har kodshecha. Holech tamim ufoel tzedek v'dover emes bilvavo. Lo roga la l'shonov, lo aso l'reyehu ra'ah. V'cherpa lo nasal krovo. Nivze beinav nimos v'esgire Adonai yichabeid. Nishba lo horav lo yamir kaspo lo nasan b'neshech. V'shochad al naki lo lakach. Ose eile lo yimot lo olam. A psalm by David. Hashem, who may sojourn in your tent? Who may dwell on your holy mountain? One who walks in purity, does what is righteous, speaks truth from the heart, who has no slander on the tongue, nor has done any harm to a fellow, who does not cast disgrace towards a neighbor, in whose eyes a contemptible person is repulsive, but who honors those who are in awe of Hashem, who swears truthfully even to personal hurt, and never retracts, who does not lend money on interest, nor takes a bribe against the innocent. One who does these things shall never falter. We're here today to say goodbye to a beloved friend, beloved son, a beloved son-in-law, beloved husband, beloved father, grandfather, and great-grandfather, beloved foster father to dozens and dozens of people who are here in the community and live around the world. President of his shul, tireless volunteer for decades, Yitzchak Meyer ben Alter Mordechai Halevi. Yesterday in shul, we read about one of the most unusual mitzvos in the Torah. The mitzvah that one is purified from contact with the dead by taking the ashes of a red heifer, mix it with water, and then to sprinkle it on people. Why a red heifer? So yesterday in shul, thinking of Mike, said that a red heifer is chosen as opposed to just any other animal because a red heifer is unique. A red heifer is exceptional. And when a person passes away, the tragedy of having anyone pass away is that since everybody dies eventually, death is the great equalizer. Everyone dies. So we recall with a red heifer, this genetic anomaly, this unique accident of nature that comes about every few generations or so. If people are fortunate, they get to hear of one. To remember that every life lost is like that red heifer, is something unique, is something exceptional that has gone from the world. And while it could be for many thousands of people around the world, they have to look really hard to find what's exceptional about them. With Mike, it's not difficult at all to figure out what was exceptional about him. Any one of 24 things I can think about Mike, when I think about Mike, any single one of them was exceptional all by itself. Put all those dozens of things together, I have never met anyone like him, and the odds are I never will. The family and friends who love him dearly and who want to speak to honor him today, now I want to call upon his daughter Ellen to share some thoughts with us.
My family, along with many other Jewish people around the world, will be celebrating Passover soon. This marks a time of beginning over after the great exodus of the Jewish people from slavery in Egypt. Passover is a day my father relished in leading the Passover Seder that he and my mother held at their home for the past 50-plus years. Even before that day, our family will be celebrating Marissa and Josh's wedding in the next week, which enriches our ever-growing family. Thus, our family is a little conflicted today. With the wedding and Passover just days ahead of us, we are faced with having to mark the passing of our father, husband, brother, grandfather, great-grandfather, uncle, cousin, foster father, and friend. Dad, Mike, played each of these roles and more in his 84 years, and he played them all to perfection. Typically at a Seder, my dad would read the Haggadah and lean, as tradition would have it, and cheerfully recite age-old prayers and blessings over the wine and matzah. This has always been such a treasured time in our family, with my mom adding her hilarious and heartwarming sounds to the cherished Passover songs, encouraging all of the children and guests to participate. Miriam took over my father's role this past year when my father was starting to fade in his energy to lead the evening, but he was still very much present. Typically, a few days after a Seder, Dad might have wistfully been saying goodbye to his visiting daughter Cheryl and other guests, which he always welcomed for as short or as long as we were able to stay, thankful for any time spent together as a family. A few days after a Seder, you would find Dad together with Mom, as they were for 56 years, tinkering around the house, fixing something broken, or devising a new invention to make something work better. A few days before the Seder, Dad would not have wanted us to come together and mark his passing with somberness and grieving. He'd remind us that he was blessed with a rich, full life that must be celebrated and not mourned. That said, it's difficult not to feel sad that we won't have Dad, Mike, in our tangible lives anymore, and we'll miss seeing his ready smile, deep baritone voice, witty barbs, and words of wisdom. Instead, we're blessed to have exceptional memories of Dad that will provide comfort and solace going forward. You're all here today because Dad touched your lives in some way. I know the time you spent with him was a positive experience. I know he lifted your heart, brightened your day, educated your mind, repaired your broken fixtures and appliances, or taught you a thing or two you didn't know. That's because Dad was blessed with qualities that both defined him and made our lives all the richer for knowing him. He loved his life, his family, and his religion. Dad was brilliant and caring, and a deeply spiritual and observant Jewish man. He had a wonderful childhood growing up in a loving family in Cleveland with his beautiful sister Esther. Dad was a model citizen, but managed to create a little trouble with his scientific experiments, like blowing up the sandbox in school. And once, by outsmarting the school bully, he injected methylene blue into a banana that he knew the bully would steal from him. And sure enough, it was several days before said bully showed his face in school again. Dad's mother, Nell, and his father, Martin, were from Eastern Europe and instilled their love of Judaism and highly ethical and moral foundation that guided Dad through his life. They were a very close family, and Dad was deeply pained after losing his father to cancer. He received a hardship discharge from the Air Force to come home and take over the family insurance business and help look after Esther and his mother, providing for the family. Dad was an electrical engineer by training, graduating summa cum laude, going to night school for 11 years while working full-time and raising his family. He was a master of any craft he endeavored, including gardening, photography, carpentry, model airplanes, winemaking, weightlifting, and later skiing, and I'm sure I left some out. After he retired from his engineering job, Dad became the fix-it guy with his Mike Can Do business and shared his vast knowledge and talents with many clients across the Heights community. Family meant more to my father than anything in the world. With my mother Betty, older sister Cheryl, and younger sister Miriam, we would have many adventures together. The 5 of us camped many summers at Roundup Lake Park and went on road trips each year to various family-oriented attractions. We visited Hershey, Pennsylvania, Holland, Michigan, the Canadian Expo, Kentucky, Tennessee, and camping through the New England states. One of the most memorable times for me was waking up to a mama bear and her cubs shaking the van Miriam and I were sleeping in on a campsite on the Blue Ridge Parkway. And I can hear my father telling us very clearly, "I told you to put the garbage away. You can't leave garbage out with the bears." Mom and Dad had so much love and tolerance for the many troubled friends I brought home like lost sheep. I mean, that's what teenagers are. We're troubled. Once cleared with their parents, they were allowed to stay with us and help to heal from whatever turbulence they had left behind. As my friend Judy wrote after his passing, she just wrote this to me on Facebook, he had a calling, Jody Newman, he had a calling to be dad to so many kids who needed that love and guidance. Our home was known for being very welcoming, and many of my friends spent Friday nights at our home celebrating Kiddush with us. Religion was never a factor. All were welcome to celebrate and join in. It did not hurt that my dad passed around his homemade wine and my mom her homemade challah breads. Years after I had moved away to Florida, my parents continued to welcome foster children into their loving home, and I believe they surpassed 50 kids. Looking back, every recollection I have of Dad is just another example of his living life to the fullest. Not only was he a devoted husband, a loving father, and in recent years an adoring grandfather and great-grandfather, he was an exceptional man in everything he did. As my husband noted to me, he did everything with great passion and enthusiasm. He took great pride in any task he took on. Dad had so many hobbies and loved to share his homemade beer and wine, the fruits and vegetables from his garden, with anyone lucky enough to know him. This past year was a tough one for Dad. He faced many physical challenges and began to mentally fade away, yet his charming nature was ever present. His love of Jewish music and prayers were always a shining beacon that would bring him back when his mind would wander. It was so inspiring to watch the transformation he would have when the holiday songs or Shabbat prayers were sung aloud. I know his soul was gently singing as he took his last breath. In just a few days, we will celebrate a wedding and then Dad's favorite, the Passover Seder. We too will have a new beginning for the Hoffers, an extended family, one in which my sister Miriam will lead the Seder, and she will lean, as Dad did, feeling the pillow of my father's arms around her as she does. My heart is filled with happiness and gratitude that we had Dad in our lives for as long as we did. I will always hold his memory close to my heart and would be surprised if he were not in my thoughts each and every day. I love you, Dad. And my sister Miriam is going to come up.
Hopefully I can get through this without having a complete breakdown. My sister talked about the fact that the family went camping, and we spent our summers at Roundup Lake Park. We came down at the beginning of the week, and we stayed all week. Dad commuted to work. Every morning he had on his tallis and tefillin in the middle of a campground davening. And come Shabbos, when it was time for Kiddush, all the kids and the families from the campground would come and join us. They learned how to say Kiddush, and again on Saturday before lunch we said Kiddush again. And my dad welcomed everybody to the Kiddush. It was the thing to do at the campground. And every summer, we went on a 2-week vacation somewhere. As Ellen said, we would drive this way or that way. We planned it out. We didn't have a lot of money. Money was very tight for the family. But Dad always made sure that it happened. One of our trips, we decided we wanted ice cream. But we couldn't afford to go to an ice cream shop to buy ice cream cones. So we went into a grocery store and bought a gallon of ice cream. The problem was we didn't think of what we were going to use to cut it up. Dad came up with the idea. He took his axe and he sliced that ice cream into slices, and we all enjoyed it because Dad always had a way around everything. The other thing Dad used to love to do at the campground was show up all the tough guys that thought that they were so tough. Dad was strong. I mean, he was really strong. And he could do what he called a pullover, where you grab the monkey bars and you slowly raise your feet up over your head and over the body until you're in this position on top of the bar. And almost none of the guys were able to do it. And when it wasn't enough that Dad beat him, he'd have my sisters and I come and do it too, just to show them that we really were better than everybody else in those ways. The other thing Dad could do was a flagpole, where you hold onto a pole and you put your legs completely out to the side while holding on like this. That takes incredible strength, something my daughter Nicole is learning to do now. But Dad was strong. Every year we used to pick grapes for making wine. We'd go and we'd pick basket after basket after basket, and we'd come home with a big garbage bag in the middle of the kitchen and all our chairs in a row, and we'd take all those grapes off the vine and put them in a bucket, and we'd use our hands and we'd squeeze them, and our hands would get stained. Dad was brilliant, and he loved science, and he came up with a chemical concoction that would get the stain off of our hands with no problem. He used that concoction probably up until last year, when things changed for him, when at the Pesach Seder the wine would spill or the grape juice, and on Shabbos when the wine or grape juice would spill, he never stained a single tablecloth. He used that concoction to get those stains out. I started weightlifting when I was a teenager, and Dad was so impressed that he decided to start lifting weights too. And we did what's called Olympic weightlifting, and we competed all over the country. Dad and I, at the time, were the only father-daughter team in the history of weightlifting to be consecutive national champions. We both won our national championship. I set 3 national records. Dad set his records. Some of the competitions we were both at in the different classes, some were just Dad's and I'd go along, some were just mine and he would come along. But Dad never lost that strength. Even in the nursing home, when people would go to shake his hand or check him, I mean, he would give a serious squeeze, like, let go. So that strength was always there for him. And I remember when my husband Marvin decided to ask my father for permission to marry me. And we went to my parents' house, and I hid up on the landing so that I could listen in. And Marvin asked my dad for permission to marry me, and my father's first question is, when do you intend to get married? And Marvin said, well, we haven't set a date yet. And my father said, I don't believe in long engagements. If you're going to get engaged, you're going to get married. If you tell me you're not getting married till a year or 2 from now, don't bother to announce your engagement. So we talked about it, and we set a date 4 months later, and then my mother was, 4 months? I can't plan a wedding in 4 months. Well, Dad said we had to get married if we were going to get engaged. Dad received so much joy from his children. His life was our family. He did everything for the family. He always made sure we were taken care of. And when the grandchildren started coming, he loved the children. My sister's children were out of town, but my children were here. He was always there. They brought smiles to his face. And just 2 months ago, when my father was in the nursing home and the hallucinations had taken over from the dementia, he wasn't grounded with reality. And I brought my 2-month-old granddaughter to see him, and I put her in his arms, and he stopped hallucinating, and he looked down at her and started talking to her, and he looked at me and said, she's smiling already. He was in touch with that great-granddaughter of his that he was meeting. And yet the rest of the time, other than when singing, he wasn't in touch with things. But boy, that great-granddaughter and the other kids were there too, and he held them on his laps. That was what life was like for Dad. And it didn't have to be his biological children and grandchildren. All the foster children were treated like his children, all the neighborhood kids. Everybody looked at him like a dad. Dad started teaching my kids to ski when they were about 3 or 4 years old. He was in his mid to late 50s. He had become a ski instructor, and he started with my oldest daughter, Nicole, when she was 3, and he taught her skiing. And when Marissa was 3 years old, he was still taking Nicole, and he took Marissa too, and he taught all of my kids to ski. And that was something that he really enjoyed doing. And I remember going camping with him once I already had my own children. We went to a water slide park, and Dad was going on the water slides. Mom was on the water slides. We took turns watching the babies, and we went whitewater rafting on one of those trips. I mean, Dad was active. He was very athletic and everything. And when my children had to leave Gross Schechter, it was Solomon Schechter at the time, because we could no longer afford it, he wanted to make sure that the children still got their Jewish education. He came over every week to teach the Parsha HaShavua, the Parsha of that week, so that they would learn about the Parsha and learn Torah. And we went for Shabbos dinners, and we went to shul and everything like that. And it was really important to him, his Judaism, and making sure that it was passed on to his grandchildren as well. And when I found a new shul, because I needed a place for my oldest daughter to have her bat mitzvah, I fell in love with the shul. And it was the first time, after being Orthodox, I saw women reading Torah and leading services. And I had never seen that before, but I wanted to do it. And I read Torah every week, and I do Haftarah, and I lead services, and I read Megillah and high holiday services. And even though it was against what my dad was being Orthodox, he was so proud of me that I went to shul every week by my choice, not because he told me I had to go, and that I did all these things to be involved. That made Dad so proud. And then later in life, when his business sold out and he lost his job and he started his Mike Can Do, he lived his life with honesty, integrity. People loved my father. All his customers loved my father. He could make anything work. And when he'd set an appointment time, he kept that appointment time. And he charged them a very reasonable amount. Some people would pay him more than he charged and say, "You don't charge enough. This is what you're worth." But my father would not have dreamed of charging more than what he thought was a fair value. He led his life as a Jew with the right morals and values. That's what he taught his children, how to be good people, how to not steal, how to not lie, how to take care of everyone. I mean, this is who my father was. And in the last couple years, when he started getting sick from the Parkinson's, I became his power of attorney. I took him to every doctor appointment. I took him to the hospital every time he was sick. I dispensed his medications. When he'd be in the hospital, I'd be there 14 to 16 hours a day with him to make sure I was there. Any time a doctor would come in, I wanted to make sure I was there to explain the story. I'd climb into bed with my dad. I'd put my head on his chest, and he'd wrap his arm around me. And I just treasure those moments. I mean, I realized he was in the hospital, but being able to climb in bed with your dad and lay with him and be so comfortable, I mean, I will never forget being able to do that. And as he got worse and had to go to the nursing home, I was there with him almost every day. I still took him when he had to go to doctor appointments. I did everything I could for Dad to make sure that he was comfortable. I was there the night that he passed, and it was very peaceful. His ending was much more peaceful than the life he had been leading for the last year. And I was so thankful for that. And everybody was wonderful. But the one main thing I want you to take away is my father was a good Jew. He lived his life as a Jew. It was the most important thing to him. And 2 days before he passed, Rabbi Davidovich came and sat at his bedside and sang to him. My dad was in a coma, but we could see his lips and his tongue moving, trying to sing along with Rabbi Davidovich. The Jewish music meant everything to him. And I played Carlebach CDs in his room nonstop because he loved Shlomo Carlebach. that was the most important thing to him next to his family, and passing that on to his family. He lived a life of a good Jew, honesty, integrity, loving everybody, and that is the way that his entire life was. And I will forever miss my father, and I don't know how I'll go on from day to day not having him, but I will have wonderful, wonderful memories, and so many of you here have those memories and have worked with him as well. Thank you.
Dad, there's not much I can add to what Miriam and Ellen have so beautifully expressed. You'll be deeply missed and lovingly remembered by not only me and your whole family, but also by the many lives you have touched with your wisdom, guidance, and patience. A limb has fallen from the family tree. I keep hearing a voice that says, "Grieve not for me." Remembering the best times, the laughter, the song, the good life I lived while I was strong. Counting my heritage, I'm counting on you. Keep smiling, and surely the sun will shine through. My mind is at ease, my soul is at rest. Remember all how I truly was blessed. Continue traditions no matter how small. Go on with your life, don't worry about falls. I miss you all dearly, so keep up your chin. Until the day comes, we're together again. I love you, Dad.
Meyer Hoffer, Zadie. I can't remember why or when, it just happened. I found a friend. My friend had a strong father, both physically, mentally, and emotionally. I never heard him raise his voice to anyone. This father was caring, gentle, and funny. And don't forget, smart. He had an answer to every question you asked him, and every answer had an explanation. He knew everything. The stories he told were the most interesting stories. I could sit there and listen to him for hours. It seemed like he had been all over the world. I learned more about my Jewish life from him, and I think about it to this day. He made me feel welcome in his home and given me insight into my religion. Not only was he welcoming to me, but he also extended that generosity to my family. There was never a failed attempt to invite my husband, my children, to Seder on Pesach. We have been through the bad, the good, but I will forever remember you. When God saw you getting tired and a cure was not to be, he put his arms around you and whispered, "Come to me." He didn't like what you went through. He gave you rest. His garden must be beautiful because he only takes the best. And when he saw you sleeping, so peaceful and free from pain, he wouldn't wish you back to suffer that again. Today we say goodbye, and as you take your final rest, that garden must be beautiful because you are one the best. Laura.
I only lived with Mike and Betty Hoffer for 6 months, starting in the summer of 1985, leaving in the winter of 1986, but they have been a part of my life ever since then. I enjoyed being in their home, especially on Shabbos, when Mike would put his hand on my head and bless me for the week. He grew crops in his backyard, growing corn at times. He asked me to try a strange vegetable called kohlrabi. I told him I wouldn't like it. He said, "Yes, you will," and I did. Mike was always calm, caring, and patient. He enjoyed science and history. He was a born teacher. He and Betty made me a part of their family. As time went on, I became a wife and a mother, and my husband Howard and my son Benjamin were also welcomed into the Hoffer family. I am so grateful to have known Mike Hoffer. With his and Betty's love and support, he helped chase away some dark clouds that were surrounding me and brought back light and joy into my life. Mike, I love you. I will miss you terribly. Thank you.
It's just a small glimpse of how exceptional he was. Because every element is something that is worth raving about. I remember thinking long ago that you could call Mike the jack of all trades and master of all of them as well. You could admire him for his intellect, for his inventiveness, not just his intelligence, like the theoretical intelligence, Mensa level intelligence, but practical application of that intelligence as well in his skill, as we've heard, electrical engineering, gardening, creation of food, the wine, the fearlessness that he had as well, to try new things, even in what most people would consider to be the later part of their life, where they slow down. He didn't slow down. I remember someone once telling me in shul that for a while he and Betty owned a monkey, as a pet. I thought that was a joke, and until I just asked them on Friday, I said, "Is this true? This doesn't sound real. It sounds like some sort of urban legend." "Yeah, I know someone who used to own a monkey," like a TV show kind of thing. And they showed me the pictures, And then when you think about, you hear a medrash, the story that the rabbis tell about how Avraham Avinu's tent was open on all four sides. And you think, that's a nice story of people of old, that their home is open on all four sides. And then you hear story after story after story about how Mike and Betty's home was literally open in that way, like on all four sides. I know how much he adored his daughters. He would tell me this story every so often with pride about how one of his daughters, when she was at the Hebrew Academy, and they were learning about Moshe Rabbeinu, how he needed a Hebrew wet nurse, because he wouldn't nurse from an Egyptian woman. And the teacher asked, why wouldn't Moshe want to nurse from an Egyptian woman? And the daughter in class said, because it wasn't Chalav Yisrael. And he would just have a smile from ear to ear just thinking about this story that was decades old. He loved the brilliance of it. But we saw in shul the intelligence, not just the Jewish IQ, if you will, but because he was an expert in gardening and an expert in engineering and electrical engineering, he would come to me with these shailas, meaning these questions on halacha. And he would ask me, can you use this on Shabbos? And he would name some sort of thing, some appliance. And I thought I knew what it was, and I would say whether I would say yes or I would say no. He said, but do you understand how it works? I said, not really. And he'd give me this 10-minute electrical lesson about coils passing through the this and the that. And I had no idea. I lost him at minute 2. And and that was it. I didn't know what to answer him. And then he would say, are you allowed to do this would you allowed to do do this to your garden with this plant using this on Shabbos, because regularly, as he knew, gardening wasn't allowed. And he once asked me if he could pick some vegetables on Shabbos from the ground, because apparently there was some sort of animal that was entering, and he knew, and sometimes he said if the vegetable falls from the plant, then someone's going to eat it, and then we'll lose those fruits or those vegetables. And I remember on one occasion telling him that no, on Shabbos you can't actually pick anything, you can't harvest anything on Shabbos, and he accepted the answer and he understood, even though it meant that he might lose the equivalent of months and months of labor. But he accepted it because he understood that's just not something that you do on Shabbos. He loved davening. He would blow the shofar for us through the whole month of Elul when we blow the shofar every morning after Shacharis. When he was strong enough, he would daven. He would act as our chazan frequently. I always had a tremendous amount of respect for me, for the people in the shul. People in the shul have told me that when they came to the shul as newcomers, how he would go out of his way to make them feel welcome. When he was president of the shul and some new members came into the shul, he came over to one of them. He said, listen, you're here in the shul now. You need a cubby, a place to put your talis bag. Here, you'll use this cubby. This is my cubby, but I'm the president now, so that I have my own seat up front. I don't need it. You take mine. And to make that person feel, you are at home here, this is your home, and I'm literally giving you my stuff because this is your home now. When I went to visit him, it was Hanukkah time, and he wasn't talking much. He was strong. Like, I went to shake his hand, like was mentioned. He squeezed my hand so that it hurt. Not he wasn't trying to hurt me, but it was just that kind of strength. I remember going a month or two before that, and I getting a call, Mike's really not doing well, we think this is it, we think this is the end. And I went over to see him, and the handshake was firm and it was strong, and he seemed fine. I said, I don't see any weakness in him. You're saying this is the end, and it might be near the end, but I've never seen him to be weak, even in those moments in shul where he seemed weak. He would come over to me afterwards, and I knew when at some point he had trouble, when he would feel his heartbeat getting erratic, and he would come over to me and he would say, I don't want you to think that I was sleeping during your drasha, during your sermon. I just had to close my eyes because it hurts, and I just need to keep my eyes closed. But please don't think I was sleeping. I heard every word you said. And the truth is, I knew he wasn't sleeping, because it's all the difference in the world between someone who's keeping his eyes closed and someone who has his eyes closed, mouth open, drooling and snoring. I know the difference between someone who is keeping his eyes closed and someone who's sleeping. But he made a point of telling me, because he didn't want my feelings to be hurt. He was right there in the first row, and he was concerned that I might be offended. And then when I went to see him on Hanukkah, and I thought, I know he likes singing. And I remember hearing from my father that even from people he had met earlier in his own life, that people, even when they begin to forget things, but they remember their music. So I thought since he loved music, he would appreciate music, and I started to sing Maoz Tzur. And even though he hadn't been speaking at all, and he was just quiet, and again, he looked like he was either resting or sleeping, but once I began to sing Maoz Tzur, he began to sing along with me. And not just that first famous stanza, but the whole thing, all 6 stanzas, all by heart. He knew the whole thing. Started to sing other Hanukkah songs. Like Miriam mentioned, even though they said he was in a coma, but I was telling people over Shabbos, I didn't think he was in a coma. Maybe he clearly was not well, but he seemed awake to me because he was joining in the singing in his way, moving his mouth and tongue, and you can see he was motioning that he heard every song, singing Purim songs, went through all the different songs of the Haggadah, from Manishtana to Chad Gadya, and he was listening, he was paying attention, and he was moving his arms. But to have that house open, you just see that any single area would have deserved a lengthy amount of praise. Like we say, had we been able to praise him just for his intelligence and his innovation, that would have been enough. And had we been able to praise him just for his strength in Judaism and his love of Yiddishkeit and his love for Torah and mitzvos, that would have been enough. And had we been able to praise him just for how he was a true son of Avraham Avinu, having his home open to Jews and non-Jews alike, so that they left with an appreciation for Judaism, for Torah, for God, then that would have been enough. Al achas kama v'kama, how much more so when all of these elements come together? Does this man deserve our thanks for having let us know him for however long we knew him, whether we've known him for 80 years or whether we've known him for 56 years or whether we've known him for 10 years or less? We all appreciate what it is that he brought to our world, like that para aduma, that unique thing, a unique being who comes about in every few generations. Yehi Zichro Baruch, may his memory be a blessing. Please rise. Hail Molei Rachamim, Shochein B'Maromim, Hametzei Menucha Nechona, Tachas Kanfei HaShechina, V'ma'alos Kedoshim U'Tohorim, Kezohar Horokia Mazirim, Es Nishmas Yitzchok Meir ben Alter Mordechai HaLevi, Sheholach Le'olamo, Ma'avur Shanachnu Mispalelim, Mi'ad Hazkoras Nishmaso, B'Gan Eden Tehei Menuchaso. Lochein Baal Horachamim, Yastirehu B'Sezer Knafav Le'olamim, V'yitzror b'tzror achayim es nishmaso, Adonai hu nachalaso, V'yanuach b'shalom al nishkavo, V'nomar Amen. God, full of compassion, who dwells on high, grant proper rest under the sheltering wings of your presence, and the lofty levels of the holy and pure, who shine as the brightness of the heavens, and to the soul of Meyer Hoffer, Yitzchak Meir ben Alter Mordechai HaLevi, who has gone to his world and for whose memory we pray. May his rest be in paradise. May the Master of Compassion bring him under the cover of his wings and bind his soul in the bond of life. May the Lord be his heritage. May he repose on his resting place in peace. And let us respond, Amen. We'll now be headed for burial at Mount Sinai Cemetery on Som Center Road. The family will be sitting Shiva at Mike and Betty's home, 4059 Wilmington Road in South Euclid. Call upon the pallbearers.